Hello, sweet one, and welcome to the Survivor Sessions, brought to you by Star. Due to mature content, please do not play this around children. The trauma of being sexually assaulted rewired my brain, it shattered my beliefs, and it led to years of self-destruction. I deeply understand the haunting effects of being raped. I've done a tremendous amount of beautiful healing work over the years, and it's time for me to gather my courage and my vulnerability so that I can share this healing with you. You can heal, and these survivor sessions were created to not only show you that you are not alone, but to also show you the ways that we can heal, release our shame, and reclaim our power. Today's episode features Jennifer. Jennifer bravely shares her story of childhood sexual abuse and the effect it had on her throughout life. Today, Jennifer helps women all over the world through her publishing company, Warrior Storytellers. If you are struggling right now, I hope this episode helps you remember your worthiness and believe in your ability to heal. Now let's dive in. Hello, everyone. I am so excited for today and our Survivor series, and I have the most amazing healer and beautiful human, Jennifer Tasnarova, here with us today. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much, Blaze. I'm so honored to be here. I love what you're doing, raising awareness. I think so much of our pain and our emotions and our shadows around this topic get stuck in the shadows, and then we never talk about them. It took me till I was 22 to even tell people what I had been through, and much longer to even be at this stage in the game. So I think it's just so amazing that you have this platform to share. Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. And I was I used a lot of discernment and handpicked the people that I wanted to have for this series, because I know it's such a vulnerable thing to talk about. And when you talk about it too soon or at the wrong time or on the wrong way, it can be really re-triggering and re-traumatizing. And so, but I know how strong your healing journey has been and what you are doing in the world and for yourself. And I just felt like you would be an absolutely amazing voice for this. So first of all, where are you? I don't know where you are living right now.
No, it's always like an adventure. I live in Durango, Colorado. It's such a beautiful place to be in the quarantine spaces, because we are like kind of in the high country of the mind here, and very strong sense of community. So I'm really enjoying being in conscious community when all this craziness is unfolding, and it's really taken my healing a lot deeper being here in this place.
Good. Oh, that also seems really perfect for you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have seen some of your pictures and videos, and you're like in the water and there's deer like in your backyard, and it's all just like very magical. So that's fun.
It's where you can like literally dance naked under waterfalls, and people are like, cool, do you? It's like such a cool place to be.
That is perfect for you. Yeah. Oh, I love it. All right. So, I would love to hear, not I would love to, but I'd be honored to hear kind of your story. And the point of all of this is to let other survivors who are struggling and maybe struggling in silence to know that they're not alone, to know that probably the feelings and things they're going through are normal, and that there is a way out. And, so please don't feel any pressure to share any gory details, but really focus on the emotions and the feelings and how that might have changed your path you were on, or what happened.
Yeah. So thank you for this invitation. And it still feels uncomfortable to talk about, which I think is part of the process. And I think that the parts that are most hidden need to come out. So I'm really grateful to be here. And for me, my experience happened when I was so young. I was 8 years old, and I didn't, so when I look back, I'm like, was that real? Was that made up? I think that's the hardest part for me to talk about today, because I don't always know in my mind, like, what did I make up because I was a little? what's real because it happened, and like how am I processing it in present time? And I think that's something that's really interesting about like childhood sexuality, because our brains are just not equipped to deal with the sensations and the emotions and the guilt and like the cocktail of feelings that comes forward with like really early sexual experiences. And I think that coming into a place where we're talking and raising awareness about childhood trafficking and these bigger issues of our world, it's brought a deeper layer of healing for me. And though I was not trafficked, and though I was not abused in that way, I still think that a lot of the emotions are the same. And I so firmly believe that when I heal that part of myself that was that 8-year-old self who was violated, it really does help like people who are still going through it. There's an energy in the collective that when I heal my piece of the puzzle, it gets healed in the collective. And so I keep coming back and back and back just for that reason, because I'm such a stand for all people being liberated and free, and especially kids having the sexual innocence that they're meant to have, and healing that hijacking that's taking place in the world. So for me, what I remember is that when I was, it happened when I was 8, and I think there was a lead up for sure that had I known better, would have been able to tell somebody. But I didn't have a lot of conversation around sexuality with my parents. It was very, we were Catholic. It was very repressed. My own mom didn't even know about periods before she started bleeding. So like there's like this level of, we don't talk about those things in our family. And my mom has come along a lot further with being able to talk to me about being a woman, but sexuality was still in the closet. And also, I don't think she was screening me because I was so little. And so it happened actually in my mom's family with my cousins. And they're more like distant cousins, like cousins who are twice removed. But so my best friend was a second cousin of mine, and we were inseparable, and we had spent a lot of time together. And I knew that her dad was an alcoholic, and I knew that her dad beat up her mom. I knew those things. And I think everybody in the town knew those things. So that was like, kind of like, how did I ever get the authority to go play at her house? I have no idea. But it happened at a sleepover. And I remember that we were watching this movie called The Three Ninjas. And so we were like kind of playing ninja and stuff. And then her brother like started beating her up. And I was like, it went from play to seriousness really fast. And I stepped in and I stopped it because I was like, hi, yeah, and I tried to stop it. And then he turned on me. And I was just a little bit stronger and a little bit more just in my space around it. And so he left us alone and it went away. And then that night we were all playing Monopoly in her camper. And this is all just little kids, by the way. There's no adult supervision. We're just kids in this space. And so we were playing Monopoly, and we played late into the night. And I remember I was winning, and so I was excited. So I'm in my space of feeling happy, feeling free, feeling self-expressed, feeling joyous, all these things. Well, in the middle of the night, we're all sleeping together in this like pile, and I wake up and somebody's touching me. And I'm like, what's going on? And I had no idea what it was, because I was like, somehow my panties were off. Somebody was like touching me between my legs. And I was so like, what's this? And there was this feeling that I woke up and I was like, I was so disoriented and I didn't know what it was. And I was like, it feels good, but I don't know what it is. And it feels bad. And so there was like this cocktail of like the sensations of it. And so I woke up and realized that he was touching me, and he was the one it was almost like it felt like a revenge, almost like couldn't get to me at the day. So at night when I was like sleeping and vulnerable, and I woke up and I yelled really loud, but I didn't wake up my friend, and I was like kind of pushed him off of me. And then I ran outside, and I was, we were in a camper. Well, anyway, I ran outside, and then I was locked out of the camper, and I was like crying all night long on the curb, and I'm like banging on the doors to go back in, and I'm banging on our parents' doors, and like nobody could hear me screaming and crying. And I was like, if I just cry loud enough, somebody's going to hear. If I'm just loud enough, somebody's going to hear me. And so I was like I was really loud. I'm shocked still that nobody heard anything. And then I was like, if I cry loud enough, my mom will hear me. And she was like, you know, all these blocks away, in a different house. But what's funny is she did, like intuitively, she said she woke up, and she woke up my dad, my stepdad, and she's like, I think there's something wrong. And he's like, Sherry, stop worrying, go back to sleep. It was kind of one of those things. But I just remember I stayed up what felt like all night long, and it was cold, and I was in this like little sleeping gown, and there were like motorcycles and all this noise of like people dragging mane happening. And so all of that just went in as trauma. And I still can't hear motorcycles today without having like panic attacks. Like for some reason, the motorcycle is a trigger more so than sexuality, but somehow in my brain, I associated that sound. And so I just cried all night long, and I like kind of fell asleep on the curb. And then the next morning they let me back in, and I was so ashamed. And because I knew that they heard me crying in the camper, like all my cousins did, but nobody opened the door or let me back in or did anything. And so I was like, at that point in time, so ashamed, and I wasn't going to say anything. And I think that's really how this abuse spreads. It's like, first you're hurt, and then you're hurt or you're shocked, or the event happens, but then you're punished, and then you're silenced, and then there's like a programming that happens. And I didn't have the courage after that night to tell anybody, because I was so scared and I was so ashamed, and I was kind of like, I should have known better. And then also I was like ashamed to say that I like maybe secretly liked it at the same time before I was aware of what was happening. And because I didn't say anything, the abuse continued, and it continued, and it got progressively worse and worse and worse. And then later there was like full penetration, and it was like penetration with like, there was like this little curtain rod that there was like all this weird shit that was like put inside of my body. And I was too scared to say anything. And I think it was the space of that night of terror that I spent on the curb talking about, or like just screaming and crying and like praying to God and praying to my mom to hear me. I think that was where I felt the most betrayed, more than the things that actually happened to my body.
Whew.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Okay. First of all, thank you for sharing that and being that vulnerable. I mean, it's a lot, and I have some things to say. I have a lot of thoughts. First of all, as a mom with an 8-year-old daughter, that's like a nightmare. Like, she's never going to sleep over in her whole life. Thank you. That's it. She's hanging out with me until she's 25. So I mean, that's so sad, and I'm so sorry that you went through that. And what really stood out was the part where nobody heard you, and you're like, how can they not hear me? And I think, in my experience, which is drastically different than yours, that was the same. Where okay, I'm screaming. I mean, I was literally screaming at the top of my lungs, and no one could hear me. And in that moment, almost like the same thing you're talking about, where it's like, oh, so no one's coming to my rescue. I guess God isn't real, because there's no like magical angel showing up. Men are horrible. I didn't know that. It's just like your world can just be shattered. All your beliefs shift like in a split second almost. It's like your brain is just like, cannot compute, and everything can change so fast in trauma like that.
Yeah. And there was a part of me that thought that maybe I deserved it, or maybe maybe I did something. And so that was an irrational thought. And I think that had I been able to process with an adult, but I didn't. And I was so scared. I was so scared because I was like, if I tell anybody what happened, I'm not going to be able to be friends with my best friend anymore. I'm not going to be able to go into any more sleepovers. Like, there were all these thoughts that I was like, I am better off not telling anybody, because I don't want, it was really my shame. I didn't want to deal with my shame. But at the time, I internalized it all. And the feeling of like, God's not coming was so, like, that is still an edge that I'm working through in some ways. And it's been healing over time as more and more and more miracles show up in my life, and God's always been there. But that was like, it felt like betrayal. And I think that's very common for people who've been through experiences like this. We're like, why is the question? And it's never answered. Well, it's kind of answered later, but not in the space that our minds can comprehend. Yeah.
Yeah. And that shame, I mean, shame is just the absolute worst feeling. It's the worst emotion, in my opinion. Anger can be exciting and have momentum, but shame is just so painful. And I appreciate you saying that there was some confusion from some of it feeling good and the shame that comes with that. And I'm really glad you said that, because that is common. And I think especially with kids who don't understand what's going on, and they can be groomed in all these ways that are just so creepy and manipulative. And also for boys, and I think, like, because this is nearly as common for boys as it is for girls, it's just not talked about as much. And I think, again, it's because of that shame. It's because maybe they had a physical reaction that seemed positive, that maybe seemed like they liked it, but they didn't. That's their body, not their soul, and
Yeah. Oh, that's I'm so happy you said that.
yeah, that's okay.
Mm.
So moving forward, and how long did this abuse go on?
Year and a half, actually. It was a long time. Because I was 8. It was the summer it was when I was 8 years old. And then when I was 10, my family moved us to a different town. And then that's when it stopped. And I had this sort of feeling like I never want to go back to that small town. So I got a chance to reinvent myself on the other side as a 10-year-old, as somebody. And I remember the choice that I made was that not only was I not going to tell anybody, but I was going to reinvent myself on the other side, which is still something that's with me. But my reinvention was like, I'm an angel. Ding! Here's my halo. And so even when I was in high school and my friends were starting to be more sexually experiential, and that's just a normal teenage thing, I think that I was like, I'm an angel. I'm never doing that. I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, I just played so dumb, and I was such a prude. And part of my reinvention of the identity that I created on the other side was that I don't do those kinds of things, and I'm not that kind of person. And I had this judgment of myself that I started projecting outwards towards other women. And I think that this is also so common now with like people who were abused really young, is that it almost took me longer to develop as a woman, in my, like, a sovereign woman in my sexuality, because I had this experience when I was really young. And so all of my sexuality was like little girl. And so it took me a while to feel like I was like an empowered woman who could handle myself in sexuality.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. And I mean, a 10-year-old, I don't think should be thinking about sexuality at all, So for you to be going through that and even consciously reinventing yourself, or I'm sure there was a ton of subconscious stuff going on throughout, I don't know, teenage years. And
Yeah.
I mean, I will say I'm glad that you had that response versus the opposite at that age. Weird
Yeah.
stuff happens. I hear stories about 12-year-olds and, again, sleepovers and things. And that's funny because, what happened with me, I was much older, but I had been a goody-goody forever. and very religious, and I was a virgin. And so, you know, for me, it was like to lose my virginity in that way, in a super violent way. And I was like, oh, well, I guess nothing I thought was true is real. So I'm going to do whatever I want. And I went like, phew, I'll use your halo sound effect. That went away. And, you know, and I'm like, nothing matters, you know, and I just thought,
Yeah.
which was also really painful because, of course, I then made all kinds of mistakes that can only be my fault. But, you know, we have these different journeys and they have their part, and I learned a lot through that, and I'm glad I'm not there anymore. But, you know, we have to be like gentle with ourselves and go, you are doing the best you could think of in that moment, and like honor ourselves to kind of release that shame, you know.
Totally. And now I feel like that is the work. Now, whether it's the work around sexuality or visibility or family issues or whatever the issue is at the moment, what I've really learned to be well resourced is like, how can I love myself even when I can't stand myself? Even when this like inner little good girl perfectionism wants to come and like, you know, make everything look like there's nothing to see here. Like, how can I even love that part of myself? How can I love the part of myself that even started to emerge once I took that mask off and there was like all this like rage and like anger underneath? For years I raged against the men. Like that was kind of like once I took the mask off, there was like this anger that just came out of me, and I was angry for a number of years, and people were like, what's wrong with you? And I also can love that part. I can look back and now love the parts that I couldn't stand at the time, but now I have acceptance.
Yeah. And that rage is interesting. I talked to a woman many years ago who, she was sharing her experience with me, and she said, you know, after being violated in her life, she kind of flipped it and ended up going through a long string of men where she would like get them all riled up and get to that point and then be like, bye. And she had this like thing, and it's kind of funny, although I'm sure a lot of these guys were nice guys, you know, but that was like her own thing of going, I have the power, I have the power, I have the power. And she did that for years, she said. And, you know, it's just so interesting. And there's a book, I cannot think of the name of it right now, but I'll find out and put a link to it under this. But it goes through like these 4 archetypes of sexual assault survivors, and you can like take a quiz and, you know, pretty easily figure out who you are. But you reminded me of that because there's the good girl, there's the tough girl, there's the party girl. I can't remember the 4th one now, but you know, you went good girl for a while, I went party girl for a while, and I'm sure we kind of do a mixture of these throughout life. But I'd love to hear now. I mean, I've known you for years. I've never heard any of this. And I know you as this very empowered, wild, like just open, healing and healer. I think all healers are always constantly healing. Yeah. That's why we can do what we do. But I'd like to hear more about like your life today and what you're doing to nurture yourself and that little girl version of you and helping other women in the process.
Gosh, that's such a good question. And I have to go a little bit back in time because I feel like there's so many pivotal moments of where healing got to happen. And this is where I think the miracle and the belief in God came back to me. And I don't think it can ever come to us in one fell swoop because it would be too much for our nervous systems to handle. But I didn't talk at all about what happened with the abuse until I was 20, 21, 22, somewhere in there. And at that point in time, my good girl had like a time limit. And I was in college and I was in theater and I was exploring myself, and I was exploring myself for the first time sexually. And I felt like I was just this raging shit show where guys were like, watch out for that one. She's a lot of fun, but watch out. And like all this like repressed stuff and I realized I had a lot of sexual energy. that I was potentially probably irresponsible with. But anyway, I had a friend at the time who was like, hey, do you want to join this play that I'm in? It's all about empowering women. And I was like, yeah, like, let's do it. And, you know, it felt very anti-men and anti-establishment. And I was totally in that headspace at that time. So I joined, and it was the Vagina Monologues by Eve Ensler. And I love her work so much because it's just what can happen with the power of storytelling. And I think that listening to stories of healing of other women and feeling those emotions in our body, like, we go on a journey with storytelling. We go on journeys, like, in the same way that we go on journeys with movies and books. But when it's somebody sharing from a stage and open, raw vulnerability, like, there's a heart transformation that happens. And so I was part of this group of women, and all of us had been violated, all of us on that stage. And yet all of us were getting out there, and we weren't sharing our own stories at that time, but we were sharing the stories of other women that we resonated with. So our emotions were real. And our transmissions were coming from such a real place. And to do this with other women, and we dressed up and we felt beautiful and we were witnessed by the audience. And it was the biggest act of healing that I could have possibly had. And I had no idea what it even was about until I did it. And that really ignited something in me where I was like, God, I need to be part of women's healing. I need to be part of open vulnerability. I need to be part of talking about the shadows that live within us. And I started to have, maybe I wasn't willing to jump into like having a conversation about sexuality with my family, but I was willing to talk about other stuff. And then I was willing to talk more. And it just started to like open this cavern in my heart. And that was really the beginning. And so from there, I've gone on, and I did have some access to therapy from a different event. You know, there's a school shooting mixed in there too. And I was finally diagnosed with PTSD, and I finally built an awareness about what that was and what that does to our brains and to our nervous system. And so that was really where I started to anchor into healing is real. It's possible. This is not a death sentence. This does not have to be the way things are forever. Like, it may be shitty now, but I can create something else. And I just leaned into the tools, and again and again and again. And from Eve Ensler, I think it went into more talk therapy, which I think is helpful to a point. But it didn't feel like it was deep enough for me. And then I started to do more body somatic work, like tapping. We've both really benefited from tapping a lot. And then I started doing more energy work and ceremony and release rituals. And I started to learn more about the feminine cycles and how our bodies are naturally synced up with the moon. And I think that what's interesting is that the more that I've done my own empowerment work, there have been other situations where I realized I wasn't safe, and I was like, fuck, it's going to happen again. Like, there's that thought that I think crosses the mind of a lot of survivors of like, oh shit, like environment check, like, oh shit, there's a scary guy walking down the street and I'm not prepared for this. Oh fuck, like I'm at a friend's house and I'm a little bit drunk and there's a guy there who's like looking at me that way. Or one time I got roofied in a bar and my friend carried me home. Like, these things have happened in my life since the abuse took place. So it wasn't like it was one isolated incident and then it just evaporated from my environment forever. But the more, like, I had done, I think, so much healing in my life that I no longer was a match to those situations. I could feel them coming, I could see them, and I could stop it before it happened. And I remember one of the things you said to me, it was a while ago, but you said that your goal, and was this a Melanie Beattie quote? The goal was to heal in such a way so that men who are abusive can't see you.
Louise Hay.
Louise Hay, yes. And I have like carried that in me since that conversation. And it's like, I can see now the wounds in other people. I can see that wound in men in the same way that I can see alcoholism and addiction in people. I can see the wound of sexual abuse in men. And I realize there's a wounding there for them too. Like, it's not just that I was the only one that was wounded. the men have been wounded too. And so first I was able to recognize that and then make myself a vibrational match for healing when they were in my space. And so I'm really happy to say that up to this point, even though I've been in lots of dangerous situations since, I haven't been traumatized in the same way. I really think that healing these trauma loops creates not just a different life and a different reality, but a different energetic match of what you're available for. And I'm grateful now. I'm really grateful in a way, because now I do feel free. And like I said, like I do feel like I can dance naked under waterfalls and not care what other people think. And I'm also not afraid of somebody violating me because I'm like fully expressed and free in my body. Like that is real. And I know there's so much chatter in our space around like if women wear short skirts or if women are on mushrooms and they go to parties or whatever that is. There's a lot of chatter out there that says like women have to be the ones to make themselves safe. And I agree to that to a point. I think we have to make ourselves emotionally safe to handle ourselves and our bodies. And once we learn that, then we're safe to express whatever we want. And we're safe to be expressed in whatever outfits we desire or whatever low shirts and high skirts and, you know, substances that, or I don't want to say substances, this is not about that. I really think plant medicines are beautiful ways to heal people. So I'm more in the space of like the conscious use of plant allies to help us heal. And I think that's been, kind of looping back to your question, like I started with Eve Ensler, and then I went to talk therapy, and then I went to tapping and somatic work, and then I went to ceremony, and I went to energy work. And then I think where I've landed in the last 2 years has really been like exploring plant medicines and ayahuasca and mushrooms with a shaman and with people that are safe to even go into those places in my subconscious mind that were still locked and really find the space to release them.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And I knew that there would be a lot. And, you know, and that's kind of how it is, because it's like every new evolution of you like opens you up to a new type of healing, I feel.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people kind of start with talk therapy, whether we want to, or that's pushed on us, or that's the only thing we've ever heard of. And I agree that there is a place for it, but I do think it's like the, I don't know, snail of healing, you know, it's like really slow compared to hypnotherapy, tapping, you know, these other things that just can go right to the subconscious. But there's a place for it if you can find someone you really like that you can talk to, and that's awesome. So I really liked what you were saying about being in these other situations where you were kind of like, what's happening? Am I safe? And I mean, I still have that. And I even like through addiction, I remember more than once, because as you know, I think I'm a superhero, and I'm like, any day now, somebody's gonna fuck with someone around me, and then like my superpowers are gonna come. Like I just have visions of like fireballs coming out of my hands.
Totally.
Me and every kid in America. So I, especially when I was drinking, because I didn't have understanding of reality, and I would see a guy starting to talk bad to a woman at the bar, and I would be like, okay, it's my time. I'm gonna go kick this guy's ass, you know?
Yeah.
And like, thankfully, I never did, and I always had like, and you know what's interesting is I always had really amazing men around me, and at the time, I treated them like crap because I had such a low opinion of men after what I went through.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just never, and I didn't really have a great example of even a dad who was a good guy, you know? So I was just like, what are these guys for? You know, like, but looking back, I always had these really good guys around me, and like every boyfriend I've had beyond high school were all really, really great guys. And I treated them so much worse than they deserved. But, you know, that was part of all of our process, and it is what it is. Anyway, so I think that like one thing I know is a lot of us that we go through trauma related to our body, we disconnect from our body.
Yes.
and can
Oh,
spend, I think some women spend a lifetime disconnected from their body. And my gut is my number one, like, I don't know what the word is, like the lighthouse. It tells me everything, more so than my head. My body has way more information for me than my logic does. And
yeah.
especially when it comes to like dangerous situations. And so these past few years, yeah, as I've been slowly reconnecting to myself and loving my body again, I can get those hits so quickly. And I mean, and I don't mess around now. So it's like, if I get a feeling that something's not right, I'm like, okay, guys, bye, I'm leaving. My friends are like, why? And I'm like, I'm not sure, but in the jungle, when a tiger's like, there's somebody that's gonna come mess with me, it doesn't go look around or say like, oh, hey, how can I help you? I'm sure you've been hurt in your childhood, let's talk it out. It's like, no, you just get the hell out of there. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not interested in seeing what's gonna happen next when I get those hits. And it's not very often, but
Yeah.
I think it's really important that we listen to our bodies and go with it. Because I'm sure too, like this young man, however old he was, who was abusing you, and you said he had this alcoholic father that beat his mom. So I'm not surprised that he sucked. I'm not surprised that he was acting out. I mean, I wish it wasn't in such an extremely horrible way, but we can look at that with compassion. I can look at my abuser with compassion.
Yeah.
It's still not okay, obviously. It's still, there's nothing good about it, but we can see like why, and then we can go, but also you should never be around people again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. I'm so happy you said that about the body, because that was a thing for me too. What part of being a good girl, I was like in my upper chakras, and I'm not mad at that, because that's where my intuition and my clairvoyance and all these other like imaginative and creative capacities came into my life. But I also was like hanging out in my upper chakras too much. It was like the world of, I think when I was little, it was like my Little Ponies and my Barbies and like all these imaginary playthings. But then as an adult, then it was like books, journals. And then like even now as an adult, I still have to keep reminding myself to be in my body and to be present. And I think this is like a deeper layer of like trauma healing work and somatics, and like what we can do as women to keep present in our bodies, because it's so much more fun to go up and out, whether it's through Kundalini work or through a substance. I think that all addiction is the wanting to go up and out instead of go down and in and face it.
Yeah, great point. You're absolutely right. I'm really happy that you're on the journey you're on. And and it took me a long time too. I did the exact same thing, and I even was aware of it at a certain point where I'm like, all of my healing is happening here, and it's really fun, and it definitely has its place, but I feel like I started in the opposite. We need to start with the root chakra and then go up. Instead, I was going from here. I'm like, something's missing. And we also hold so much cell memory in our bodies, and it has to be moved out physically, I feel, whether that's through, I know you do embodied dance and these different types of movement that I think, even I was like doing cycling classes a whole bunch before COVID, and I would like be riding my bike to nowhere and thinking like, release trauma, release trauma, release trauma. And like, which sounds so silly, but it was amazing. And it was doing stuff, So just, I think setting those intentions can be huge too.
Yeah. And you're so right in that, like releasing, I don't know, anger through our body when we're on a bike, or anger through our body in kickboxing, or anger when we're embodied dance. Like that to me feels like such a release, because I regularly need to feel those emotions and move them through my body. I had to do it last night after watching part of the debates. Like I had all this energy that was in my body that is like, this is not going with me to bed. This is not going with me into my next day. And so I really had to dance it out and express in my body how hearing that was making me feel. And so I'm grateful now that this is I think the final state, and maybe not the final, but landing in a space where I'm grateful for my trauma because it opened the doors to my healing and it opened the doors to the magical life. That's where I now get to sit. And of course, I have like done so many years of forgiveness work and processing to get here. That's not where I started. And I think that's where a lot of people want to end up. But the journey towards that has given me the tools to navigate life now in a whole new way. And I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah. So let's just imagine for a minute that there's someone listening who is you 10 years ago. What message do you have, or for someone who is still kind of struggling in silence?
Yeah.
What would you tell them?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say, like, how okay can you make yourself for what you're experiencing? Like, you want to be a shit show? How okay can you make being a shit show? You're in judgment. How okay can you make your judgment? I think that so much of the work was just being okay with myself for the stage that I was in and not trying to bounce out of it and get to somewhere else. But like, great, be a shit show. Great, be messy. How okay with the mess can you be? And from that seed of compassion, that's where the next reality is born. So I really love the Jenny that was a shit show. I really love the version of me that was angry. I really love the version of me that was argumentative and combative and all the things I needed to move through to be where I am now. And I think if I could go back in time 10 years ago, I would just say, like, how okay can you make this? How okay can you make yourself for being this way?
I really like that. I really like that. And that, being gentle with ourselves. Yeah, because I do that still, where I get so frustrated when I'm not doing okay. Why is you know better? Why is, why are we still afraid? If fear pops up, I get immediately frustrated. I'm like, this shouldn't still be a thing, and that doesn't help. And then I'm just kind of denying my emotions and blah, 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 but so I really like that. And I've been trying so hard to just be gentle in ourselves and go, oh, okay, this is coming up. Let's look at it. What's the reason? And also, P.S., we know now that emotions aren't emergencies. It will pass. And depending on how I want to work through it, it'll pass fast or slow, but it's not going to be here forever.
Yeah.
So I really like that. And I think that's a good message for people wherever they're at right now to be more gentle and to go, okay, this is this part of the journey.
And to recognize this is not the final resting place. There's a way that when you're in it, it feels like it's going to stay forever. And there's a wanting to speed it up so it doesn't have to last. And I think that the more I try to work through something really fast, the longer it stays. But the more okay I make it, and the more I realize this is not where I'm not going to be like this forever. This is not going to be the way my life feels forever. And then it starts to shift a lot more quickly.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much. I think this conversation has been super powerful, and I just have so much love and honor and respect for you to share all of this today. I mean, that's huge. It takes a ton of courage, and you and I have talked about this a few times and both understand how needed this is. And going back to the first thing you were talking about with child trafficking, and I think there's a lot of really tough information that's coming out right now that is going to continue becoming more and more known, and what's going on isn't new, but the awareness, I feel, is. And I also agree that as we heal ourselves, we're healing others. And I think about that mostly just with my own family, generational healing. But I agree, it's like the collective, and so a way we can help others that are going through abuse is to continue our own healing and set intentions, that we're also healing them as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it feels so good now to link arms with women like you and other women who are on the same path, who've been healing from this for a long time. And there is a kind of going back to, what would I say to somebody who's still in the trenches? There gets to be this magical unicorn tribe of other light warrior workers who are doing the same thing. And at a certain point in the journey, you get to link up. And then life gets so good and meaningful and deep and fulfilling. And now I think that's where the clarity comes in of like, oh, this was always what I signed up for in some capacity, to be this empowered and to be doing this work now. And maybe I had to go through a certain flavor of abuse when I was 8 so that I could be empowered and stop abuse as a woman now that I'm grown. And maybe it was never about me. Maybe it was just the journey I had to go on to become the person that I now am. And to be doing the work with you and with so many others who've taken up this mission too, it's beyond the life I would have imagined for myself.
Oh, that's beautiful. And yeah, there absolutely is another side. Like, you're not done on your journey. And you mentioned being a shit show. I definitely had that period of my life for quite some time, and I can still picture like nervous looks on people's faces around me, just like, hope Blaze is here. Like, and it's still embarrassing, but what's beautiful is, I've been sober. I just celebrated 9 years. My life is dramatically different. And I once in a while, just the other day, I had a conversation with someone who I very briefly dated when I was deep in addiction, and I was the worst. And I was just so all over the place, and it ended in a really embarrassing way to me. And he was just like, and this really great person. And he reached out, and what I love is hearing from people that knew me when, the people that were nervous for me, that were hurt by me, and then them coming to me now and going, holy shit, like, look at you now. Like, how did you get to this place? It's so different. And even better when I have people reach out and say, I'm ready to get sober. Can you help me? Because I saw you then and I see you now. And if you could do that, like, anybody can, and that's super, super powerful. So this isn't the end of the road. Like, and healing, as much as you and I love magic and unicorns and fairy dust, that's not what got us here. It was putting in that work and taking all those little steps that are available to everybody. And I think it's really important that people know that we're not lucky. We didn't I think that gets missed a lot.
Yeah, totally it does. And like the dark side of the light workers too. It's like, it takes a lot of deep shadow work to be this free. It just does. And I think too, people are like, what do we do in the political climate? What do we do about this? What do we do about that? I just think your job is to wake up, make yourself free, and then you can take on whatever issue you want to. That's your piece of the puzzle towards making this world a better place. It really is that simple.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that is a perfect place to wrap up. And I'm just so appreciative. So thank you. And I just can't wait for people to hear your story. I know it's going to help so many people. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Blaze. I love being here. And thank you for all the work that you do.
This is my battle cry. Oh, it's do or die.
If you are a survivor or a loved one of a survivor and you are struggling, please call STAR's free 24-hour hotline at 800-478-8999. You are worthy of healing.